All right. Welcome to episode 1 of the OBGYN Resident Survival Guide. I have been wanting to start this podcast for quite some time, and I'm so excited to be here finally actually doing it. But I thought before I actually start with the clinical content, it might be kind of nice to introduce myself and let you know about who I am a little bit and how I came to be an OBGYN today. So I was born and raised in Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. And as I was going through high school trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to do with my life, I found that I always excelled in the arts, not the sciences. I was good in English, social studies, writing, literature, etc. So because I loved to write and I knew what my strengths were in high school, I decided I wanted to pursue a career as a journalist or a novelist or a filmmaker of some kind. I was very interested in the entertainment industry. And ultimately, I applied for journalism and communications programs both in Canada and the United States. In September of 2010, I moved from Vancouver to Ottawa, Ontario, also in Canada. And I started my Bachelor of Arts in Communication Studies, which I really enjoyed. So as you can tell, going into the world of healthcare was never part of my plan. And even though both my parents were in healthcare, it just never really appealed to me at all. However, that all changed in my third year of undergrad, where I had a lot of exposure to individuals who were struggling with depression and anxiety and suicidal ideation. And I myself was struggling with anxiety and panic attacks and depression as well. Ultimately, for these symptoms that I was experiencing, I went to a family doctor who started me on medication and also therapy, and my life just completely changed for the better. Now, this process occurred over the course of a year, and during that year, I took a whole semester off to really work through some of the things that I was struggling with, and also just to figure out what it is that I wanted to do with my life, because now that I had had these experiences and I had seen what so many people around me were struggling with in terms of mental health issues, I suddenly found myself desiring to be able to be for others what my family doctor was for me, which was someone who provided me with the tools and the resources that I needed to essentially make a full recovery. So in my third year of undergrad with zero science background, I decided to start looking into how I'd be able to achieve that goal. After spending a considerable amount of time looking into my options, I decided that I wanted to go to medical school to become a psychiatrist. And the reason that I wanted to specifically be a physician and a psychiatrist was because I wanted to be able to prescribe. So as this was going on, I signed myself up for pre-med courses and quickly learned that it was going to add on several more years to my undergrad to complete all the prerequisite courses for most Canadian and US medical schools. And I knew that I was willing to do whatever I had to do to get into medical school. However, I really wanted to find a way to expedite that process because at this point, even though I was still very young, I just felt like I was 3 years behind already, and I did not want to waste any more time. So this is what led me to exploring the idea of attending medical school abroad. There were many considerations that factored into my decision to apply to Caribbean medical schools, but ultimately my gut was telling me to go there, so I did, and eventually went to St. James School of Medicine. And at this medical school, the basic sciences are completed in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, so I was there for 16 months straight, completing my basic sciences, and eventually completed my clinicals in Chicago, Illinois. So all throughout medical school, until my OBGYN rotation, I had planned to become a psychiatrist. Neurology was a close contender because that's just what brought me into medicine. That's what was interesting to me. That's why I completely changed career paths, as I mentioned earlier. But everyone tells you to go into clinicals with an open mind, which I did for pretty much every single specialty except for obstetrics and gynecology. And I think that's just because you learn so little about the specialty in medical school. So I never really had the opportunity to become interested. And when I did learn about it, I'll be honest, I was completely disinterested. I didn't really want to have to do pelvic exams all day. I didn't think surgery was very interesting. I didn't want the lifestyle. It sounded terrible. And overall, it just sounded too intimidating, too hard, and like too much work. And what I think was a divine turn of events My psychiatry rotation, which was supposed to be my second core rotation, was switched from the beginning of my third year to almost the very end, and it was replaced with OBGYN. And as you can imagine, I went into that rotation with very low expectations. However, very quickly, I realized that I was enjoying myself much more than I expected, and then I started to love it, and I loved my attendings that I was working with. Specifically, I had one particular attending that was a fantastic mentor to me. But because of what I thought I knew about the lifestyle and the demands of the specialty, I tried very hard not to love it. I did not want to like the specialty at all, but I couldn't help it. And reasons why I loved it were I felt like I was innately just being pulled towards it. I loved the female-to-female relationship that I was seeing between my attendings and their patients. It turns out I really actually did enjoy doing surgery. Not that I was doing it as a med student, but I liked watching it and being a part of it. I liked the minute-to-minute variability of the job, how nothing is boring or the same. You could be seeing clinic for a couple hours in the morning and then delivering a baby a couple hours later and then in the operating room, all within a same 8 to 12 hour span. And overall, just my spidey sense was telling me that I needed to do this job. But I held out all year until my second to last core rotation, which was psych, and psych just was not what I expected it to be. And part of me wonders if it's because I went in with such high expectations and this had been the whole reason that I decided to go to medical school, or if if maybe I just never would have liked it in the first place. I'll never know. And as I went throughout the rotation, it really wasn't that there were a lot of things about the specialty that I didn't like so much. It was that mostly I just could not stop thinking about my OBGYN rotation. And it was like that for every other rotation after OBGYN. Every other rotation, I was constantly wishing I was back on labor and delivery. I was constantly wishing I was back in the OR doing and observing GYN surgeries. And I signed myself up for some electives and sub-Is. So several months and a lot of hard work later. Again, of course, there's more to this story, but we are trying to keep things concise here. But ultimately, I matched to OBGYN residency in March of 2020. And in July of 2020, I started my intern year at Mercy Hospital in Chicago. However, ultimately, a few months into my intern year, we essentially were notified that the whole hospital was shutting down. Not the residency programs, but the actual institution as a whole was shutting down. So all of the residents had to interview elsewhere and transfer to other programs, and it was this big ordeal. But that ended up being a huge blessing in disguise for me because I ended up loving and having a fantastic experience where I ended up transferring to, which was the OBGYN program at Loma Linda University in California. And those 4 years of residency were the hardest 4 years of my life, but also the most rewarding. I learned so much about medicine, women's health, relationships, myself, and just life in general. And now as an attending, I get to do this amazing job and work with so many amazing patients and colleagues and residents and students. And I just feel like I had so much help along the way. I had so many wonderful mentors and advisors and attending faculty that helped me to get to where I am today. And I really just wanted to be able to give back to the trainees in some way. And I thought that creating this podcast would just be a great and fun way to start. So that is my journey through medicine and how I got to where I am today, essentially. And of course, there's so many more details within that story, just like with all of you who are listening. And although it might sound kind of linear in hindsight, just trust me, there were a lot of ups and downs, as I know anyone who is listening is probably experiencing themselves. So I hope that provides a little bit of insight into who you will be hearing from every week in these podcasts. Ultimately, my goal is really just to help the trainees out there survive medical school and survive residency and make it through to the other side with the knowledge and skill set that they need to just be great OBGYN doctors. If you're interested in getting your hands on any of the free downloadable resources that I have for both students who are going into OBGYN as well as current OBGYN residents, you can visit my website at drcaseymiller.com/free downloads. The link to that will also be in my show notes. Otherwise, I will see you soon for another episode. Have a great week.